Red Dead Redemption marks the end of an era, the conclusion to the lawless and Wild West as the world knew it in the early 20th century. This game is a redemption story, obviously, as the title states. It follows a man named John Marston through the dying Wild Wild West as he hunts down a man named Bill Williamson, and eventually two other men by the names of Javier Escuela and Dutch Vanderlyn. We learn that John is pursuing these men not for his own personal gain, but because an agency known as the BOI, also known as the Bureau of Investigation, also known as which acted somewhat like a private investigators bureau or somewhat like the FBI. Before the FBI, before John Dillinger came in the 1930s. They have abducted his wife and his son, Abigail and Jack. Marston is now forced to hunt down and capture or optionally kill all men that I just stated. So, to immerse you in the world that Rockstar envisioned for you, let me run you through a little scenario. Imagine this. The year is 1910. You just buried your third child from cholera, and the pesky bandits keep poaching all your cattle, which is your only food source besides the garden and crops you grow. They keep poaching them and you hear them come back outside your window. It's the middle of the night, a cold, desolate summer night in the middle of Texas. You're a 2 days ride away from any sort of civilization or sheriff's office. And what are you gonna do about it? You don't know how many men are outside your door, if they're armed, where they came from, how many there are, and who they're with. All you know is that they're stealing your livelihood and they will come back again if you choose to chicken out. What are you gonna do? Leave in the morning, head to town, report the situation? Do you risk leaving the rest of your small children and your wife home for what could be a 2 or 3 day journey on horseback? It's not even guaranteed you'll make it to your destination. There are a lot of things other than bandits that can kill you out in the open desert road. Maybe hire a bounty hunter. The lawmen aren't subject to do anything about it, and you don't really have money for a bounty hunter. Or the lawmen will flat out tell you it's not that important, they're too far away and it's too much of a hassle for them to get out there and investigate. Or are you gonna do what any tough and hardened American Wild Wild West man would do and grab your Winchester repeater, kick the fucking door down, and shoot every last one of those motherfuckers and fight till the last man standing? Now, with all that being said, let's just dive erection first into the sick-ass Wild West swimming pool hot tub full of green goo that I got planned for you. This video is going to be broken up into a few different parts for the sole reason of my severe ADHD. If I don't separate shit up into different parts, I'll go insane and probably implode. Not really, but ultimately it'll make this video a fucking total mess where I'm jumping all the way from Arkansas to Maine, back and forth and back and forth. You get the idea. Red Dead Redemption is an open-world, third-person shooter yeehaw cowboy game developed by Rockstar, and particularly Rockstar San Diego, and released on May 18, 2010. The game received loads of awards and Game of the Year from multiple publications, which comes to no surprise since it was in development for a shitload of time, not really, only about a nickel piece, what we also call 5 years. And Rockstar fucking workhorse their employees to death through its creation. Although the game was given tons of accolades and praise, it was subject to a decent amount of criticism along with controversy due to Rockstar's management's insane crunch methods. Oftentimes, certain AAA video game companies have unrealistic deadlines set for their development teams, causing them to feel pressured to work insane overtime hours and some of the time without overtime pay, thus causing many employees to burn out or get shunned away from the company if they didn't work around the clock, causing the other employees to pick up the slack they left behind. During the end of development for Red Dead, Rockstar was getting a lot of hate for the conditions they had their employees working under. That obviously hasn't stopped Rockstar and their recent titles still being under the spotlight for that infamous crunch. It's not as bad as other companies, but still relevant and something that should be condemned at this point in time, in my opinion. Enough about the crunch. Let's continue more about the fun things of the game's development that I thought was actually really interesting. Something that I thought was pretty cool was the fact that Rockstar actually sent out some cool cats to visit landmarks in the western parts of the United States. Aside from having a development of over 800 people, The game really pulls out all the stops in regards to the Western history of the United States, or lore, if you will. Compared to modern day games of the PlayStation 4 generation, this game doesn't look that bad, believe it or not. Sure, it's a bit dated and doesn't have as much graphical fidelity as what you would see today, but makes up for it with its full-of-life world and beautiful landscape settings and views. Red Dead uses Rockstar's Rage engine, or the Rockstar Advanced Game Engine, something to also take into account when speaking of the graphics of this game, that it was also made for the PS3 and Xbox 360. Although it's never fair for me to critique the graphics of the older games that I talk about in my videos, some of the things I will be talking about is the general bugs in this game, but I'll talk about that more later on. The general game mechanics of this game can be extremely fucking sloppy, but it works, but just barely. Marston controls like any of the other characters in any Rockstar game. It's really hard for me to put it into words, but if I had to, I'd say that it just feels stiff, clunky, and at times unresponsive. Especially when riding on a horse or buggy. It's really similar to GTA Liberty City, as the cars in that game drive like fucking lubed up ice cubes drifting across the countertops in my kitchen. But riding horses in this game is really fucking annoying at first, and still annoying all the way throughout the game, but I was able to kind of get the hang of it, and it became less of a problem the more I played. Horses being extremely hard to turn and maneuver, let alone how fast the stamina of each horse runs out. And don't even get me started about obstacles in your way and how you jump over shit constantly. Oh man, it's so fucking annoying. Like, come on, Bucky Bronco, you're a fucking purebred stallion racing horse. Seabiscuit, your whole life you've galloped the desolate desert of Texas, and now you're telling me when it's time to race Bonnie fucking McFarlane, you get tired after 30-second sprints? If this were any racing situation in the real world, they'd have Tony from the fucking Mafia Ran horse racing track take you out back and put some fucking hot lead through your brain. Just kidding, but that shit actually did happen back in the day, and if a racehorse couldn't deliver, they were, executed. Sorry, sometimes my anger gets the better of me when I'm talking about Rockstar games. Alright, so wait, I'm getting way ahead of myself here, so let me slow it down and get a bit more into the story. So the game starts with a very slow yet interesting open shot of John on a train on his way to the location the game takes place in. Cutscene continues on the train as John listens to passengers talk about the savagery of the West and how much civilization has changed and what else should change. This continues for about 5 minutes until John arrives in the town called Armadillo. You do some stuff around town and then you go show up at Bill Williamson's hideout and John gets fucking blasted into next year. You wake up what seems to be a few days later in a bed with a woman named Bonnie McFarlane. Well, no. John is in the bed. Bonnie is standing in the doorway, telling you that you owe her 15 big ones for the surgery required to save your life. And I mean, talk about affordable healthcare. Where did we go wrong? So, the McFarlane Ranch after John is shot is where the game really begins. In order to pay off the 15 smackaroos you owe Bonnie, you are to work for her on the ranch, getting some regular shit done for her. This also acts as the game tutorial, essentially. As in the beginning, you learn to ride a horse, shoot guns, duel to the death with some of the simple country folks scattered across the West. This beginning part isn't so bad, and I'm not saying that lightly. Prior to me actually completing this game start to finish, I had probably made at least 10 attempts to finish this game since its release. It wasn't until Red Dead Redemption 2 came out that I actually decided I'd finish this game, and wasn't until a month ago I was able to actually get around to doing it. So, having played this beginning section of the game so many times as me, you kind of learn to blast through it. It also helps that Bonnie's got that donk. Anyways, we get a cool little race in the beginning, some gunfights, and we're off to return to Armadillo to speak with the marshal. And at this point of the game, our main objective is to find and kill or capture Bill Williamson. But of course, we are not going to be able to do that just yet, since this is a Rockstar game, and it's a little like Murphy's Law, what can happen will happen. Basically, what I'm trying to say is we literally can't ever get a straight fucking answer from anybody in this doggone game, and everyone we come across needs us to do 8 billion things before they tell us any piece of information on Bill's whereabouts. So on and on we go throughout the beginning sections of the game, and we come across a pretty interesting character, a man by the name of Nigel West Dickens. And he's basically a snake oil salesman that we have to help sell his fake potions to the simple folk of the nearby area. And I tell you, there really is never a dull moment in any Rockstar game. Encounters with Mr. Dickens are always really strange and leave me wanting to put a hole in his head by the end of each one. Also, along with Mr. Dickens, there's a really cool character known as Seth, and he's also a grave digger that's apparently lost his mind and given up everything in his life to search for treasure. Mr. Dickens, Irish, and Seth are people that actually help us advance through the story, and we basically attack Fort Mercer where we think Bill Williamson is, and then it escalates into... Never mind, this is all... I'm getting ahead of myself here. So, anyways, you continue through the game, exploring and doing various tasks for all the people you come across. You get a lead after a bunch of time wasted that Bill and your old accomplice and gang member, Javier Escuela, are probably in Mexico. Well, they definitely are probably maybe in Mexico. So, we head to Mexico, and there's actually a really cool shootout river float mission on the way there. We get to Mexico and essentially get the same runaround treatment as we did in New Texas, or whatever the fuck they call the landscape, or whatever state, fictional state it's in. I don't know. All Rockstar's games are super fucking confusing. They always make up a bunch of weird names and shit. Like, just call it Los Santos, Los Angeles. It's the same fucking thing. Everybody seems to know what we're looking for in Mexico and who we're looking for, but they need us to do a little something for them first. Just like it always goes in every Rockstar game. So, I'm just gonna spoil this part for you in case you were wondering. You find Javier, you have the option to kill him or let him go, and I killed him. Then you find Bill, and the scummy-ass president of Mexico at the time. I killed both of them too. And then you can return to the BOI agents to collect your reward, aka your kidnapped family. And can you guess what happens next? Yep, you guessed it. They need you to do one more thing before they give you your abducted family back. Find and kill Dutch Vanderlyn, John's old gang leader. Which, towards the end of Red Dead Redemption 2, we can see Dutch completely losing his shit and slipping into insanity and psychoticism, but in this game, he's a totally evil and batshit crazy dude. He goes about killing people with no reason or remorse, so watching him fall off a cliff is actually quite satisfying. Anyways, you go back to your family at the end, and you're reunited with your wife Abigail and your son Jack, just for John Marston to fucking die at the end because the BOI can't leave any loose ends. So then the very last mission of the game is the player playing as Jack, slaughtering all the boy dudes. Kinda cool, but also really fucking lame since we just played an entire game working for the BOI just for them to turn around and murk us up in the end. Like, why didn't they just kill John when he was on the mountain right after he killed Dutch? I don't know, but the world may never know, I guess. And now is the perfect time to ride that big ol' escalator into the next part of the video, so I appreciate this very smooth editing transition into the next section of me. Here we can get into one of my favorite features of every Rockstar game, the original soundtrack, or also known as the OST for my simple folk out there. So, now I'm going to talk about how good Rockstar is at setting the mood for the soundtracks in their games. Most of the time in video games, the soundtracks can be a bit hit or miss. In my opinion, it can go from just subtle ambience and background noise while you go on a murdering rampage through the streets of Los Santos. Speaking of Los Santos, the cool, synthesized, crime-doing music in GTA 5 is exactly what I'm talking about with this soundtrack business, boys! Rockstar's attention to detail with certain aspects of game development in particular is phenomenal. Games like The Witcher 3, Skyrim, Oblivion, Minecraft. I'm talking about music you turn on when you need to study or conjure demons on a cool summer night. I actually listened to Red Dead 1 soundtrack during the entire writing of the script to, set the mood. Well, back to the regular scheduled programming here. The main soundtrack for Red Dead was composed and written mostly by a couple of cowboys by the names of Bill Elm and Woody Jackson, which both of them also were in a super underrated band called Friends of Dean Martinez. And I didn't know that fucking band before I started writing this script. It was only until I researched into the game's soundtrack that I was able to find that. I'm not like some cool, super awesome dude that has like this really weird, obscure taste in music. This band is also some pretty good listening vibes if you're driving through the countryside, shooting a double barrel shotgun out your driver's side window, because every song by them sounds like the intro to a James Bond movie and made me want to internationally rob banks while listening to it while writing this script simultaneously. It was said that the soundtrack for Red Dead was heavily inspired by this old chap named Ennio Morricone, who was an Italian composer responsible for a whole shitload of amazing original scores for movies all across the board, but mainly spaghetti westerns. This dude was a god amongst men and composed scores for movies like The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, which I mean is one of the most influential and amazing soundtracks in history. Also, he wrote the soundtrack for The Hateful Eight, and way too many to list since it's actually more than 400, so if I was to list them all, we'd be here for a while. This guy actually died earlier this year, so RIP, my brother Ennio. As you're riding your horse through the desert of fake Texas, there is no question of immersion in this game as you listen to the steel guitar's slow but steady percussion and full of life whistles and snake rattling. There's really no other way to describe it besides gritty, yet homey and welcoming, but yet sad and lonely at the same time. Listen, I don't know what's going on in my weird booger brain, dude. The soundtrack's got me all juiced up inside. I'm feeling all fuzzy. The last thing I'll say about the soundtrack, and then I'll stop fangirling over it, is that personally I think it's up there with Cuphead, Skyrim, and heck, even Red Dead 2. Really what I'm trying to say here, guys, is that it's really just the kind of music you want to melodramatically write in your diary to at your local overpriced coffee shop after a long day of doing farm work at your pa's ranch. No more of that lo-fi pitch-down XXX Tentacion tracks, buddy. We're crying to cowboy music now, cowpoke. So now here in this part, we're going to talk about the game mechanics of Red Dead. And Red Dead is quite the silly game. It's such a solid game in every other aspect of it that I feel it almost gets a pass on some of the extremely frustrating game mechanics and bugs it has in it. And yeah, this section is going to be me taking a big fat poo and you're all going to watch it. Now that I'm done talking about the original soundtrack like a drunk 25-year-old at a high school party, bothering some girl about Mac DeMarco being the best musician ever, I'll get into some of the real nitty-gritty.
Let's get down to the nitty-gritty.
Red Dead has one of the most broken cover systems I have ever seen in a game. It's not too much different than GTA 4 in the sense that you can either jump from cover to cover, and just pressing A to get out of cover only works like half of the time. Also, I can't even tell you the amount of times I accidentally robbed someone's horse by pressing Y, just trying to get onto my own horse, and the game made me shove old man Steve off his horse or steal a carriage or some shit like that. Also, similar to Red Dead 2, the looting system is really goofy, where every time I want to loot a dead body, I have to go through the stupid animation where I manually loot each body one by one, along with skinning animals and picking flowers. It really just takes too long and doesn't really have a cool enough reward to warrant making me want to sit through the animation. The shooting not in combat is a bit broken too, where the game auto-locks onto the nearest person when you press the left trigger, which was a pain in the ass for the sharpshooter missions that require you to shoot birds out of the sky, because I accidentally shot the guy that wanted me to do the sharpshooter missions on accident, or I just aimed a gun at him and he freaked out and ran away, and I had to wait for him to come back and forget about the situation for me to redo the sharpshooter missions. And a few times during my playthrough of the game, the auto-lock was completely broken, where it wouldn't actually turn on, and I had to manually aim at everything when I wasn't in combat. I had to completely restart my game to get it to work again. It's just little things like this that end up being big things back to back of each other. I get that this game is 10 years old at the time of me making this video, but Rockstar did the same fucking things in Red Dead 2, just minus some of the more ridiculous bugs that are in this one. Bugs like men getting stuck in the air after being shot off their horses, or the game randomly spawning rocks, wolves, and people right in front of me while I'm riding my horse at light speed down a path. Maybe that's just the rendering limitations of the Xbox I got, but I don't really think so. So here we are at the end of the video. I didn't really want to end on a bad note by talking about the defects I saw in this game, so I guess I'll leave it on a somewhat positive note, since I actually did have a lot of fun playing and streaming this game. My only complaint is that Rockstar didn't really stray from the linear path they carved out in this game with Red Dead 2. If they really expanded on the Red Dead universe, it would have been really awesome and would have added so much longevity to the lifespan of Red Dead Redemption 2. I don't know, but I feel like if there was a lot more role-playing mechanics in the game, the replayability would have been endless. More options, more exploration, more dialogue. It really just makes me wish that Rockstar was able to make a video game that gives the player some fucking control. Every time you stray from the path Rockstar wants you to take, it immediately corrects you, giving this game very little replayability since there's no way to carve your own path or make your own adventure. Similar to an Uncharted game, wonderful story and visuals, but incredibly linear. Another factor was just all the bugs that this game contained, and then some of the same bugs appearing in Red Dead Redemption 2 really pissed me off. But other than that, the game's story is amazing, the game's dialogues are amazing, the game's scenery is amazing, and the visuals are incredibly amazing. How many times am I going to say amazing? Anyways, they're really cool given that this game is like 10 years old and the limitations that they were stuck with while creating this game. It's just wonderful that they were able to create such a beautiful masterpiece, but a masterpiece yet flawed, if I'm, being honest here. So I suppose I'll just end it here before I go like absolutely crazy with ranting about what could have been. I didn't really want this video to be too long anyways, since I'm working on a lot of other stuff right now, and I really think I need to take a break from Rockstar games for a little bit. Well, take it easy, guys and gals. Make sure to check me out on Twitch if you want to watch me play any of these games live, or at least see some of them. Bye.